ANC Women's League President Bathabile Dlamini is now facing calls for her to be subjected to the ANC's step-aside rule. It follows today's court ruling, which found she lied under oath when she appeared before the ConCourt over grant payments. Now, the ANC step-aside rules dictate that members must step aside, rather, when they're being criminally charged by the courts, well, especially where you have a case of a verdict. Now, perhaps the lines become clearer. We're joined by political analysts, Professor Dirk, Kotze and Rebone. Good evening to both of you, and thank you so much for your time. I choose my words carefully when I say that the fact that there is a court verdict here on the case of Bathabile Dlamini, that it might be clear what needs to happen in as far as the application of the step-aside rule is concerned. Rebone, let me kick it off with you. What should happen next?
I think we should say what should have happened, Katie. Because if you read Rule 2570 of the ANC Constitution, it's clear that once you are charged, you should step aside. So the Constitution should have kicked in when she was charged initially. But this also says that it is clear that the ANC took this matter very lightly, because if you had people like the Secretary General who's been suspended and her having been active in party programs or party meetings, it shows that the ANC never took this matter seriously. The Constitution should have kicked in. So now, moving forward, what's going to happen? Obviously, the officials will have to sit and engage on this, which then will go to the NWC and the NEC. But it should have kicked in initially when she was charged per Rule 2570 of the Constitution of the ANC.
Professor Kotze?
Yes, I always agree with it. Now, the one aspect which is a bit can become hair-splitting is whether the way in which the ANC interprets Rule 25.70 includes other forms of criminal charges, except or over and above corruption, because it is correct that in the Constitution it refers in general to a person being charged. But in the implementation that was made since the decisions by the NEC was specifically a narrower decision, and that was with respect to corruption charges. So I don't know to what extent this will become an issue or not. I think what is going to become part of the defense from the Ms. Dlamini side is the fact that she will say, I'm going to take it on appeal, so that it is not the final verdict of a court, because this is a magistrate's court, so it's the lowest court so far that has made this judgment, and it's most possibly can be taken further on appeal. So, but in principle, if the ANC wants to apply its own principles, then certainly it should have been part of the step-aside application.
Of course, the difficulty here is that you have an inquiry, an independent inquiry that already raised questions about the way in which the minister had handled herself when it came to these processes, and the extent to which she was transparent and open when it came to her role as a deployee of the ANC. Rebone, something like that should worry any organization, that one of your members who you have entrusted with such an important portfolio has been found by a court of law, and that being the Constitutional Court, to have acted recklessly, and basically the other word there is to have been grossly negligent.
I think we should go back to the 2019 elections, because you must remember that also there was a list, that came out of those who had been asked by the Integrity Committee not to go back to Parliament because of such issues, and her name, I know that was also on that list. That's why today she's not a member of Parliament and she's not in the cabinet. But the reality of the matter is that the ANC at times would take things lightly in terms of implementing its own resolutions, and they speak something on the left and they do something on the right, unfortunately.
Let me come to you, Professor Kotze. Do you foresee this particular finding today again being used as part of the factional battles that we have seen in the ANC. And the reason I ask this is looking at the officials of the party that were there in support of Ms. Dlamini today.
Yes, well, the fact that she is the president of the Women's League gives her even a higher status or more prominent status than many other persons who have been in similar situations. Over the years, and since she has been elected as president of the Women's League in 2015, she had openly supported President Zuma, and that's obviously right. She also supported last year and earlier on the Secretary General Ace Magashule when he was already charged, as well as other persons that are very sort of well known to be on the side of President Zuma, supporters of him. And given the position where the ANC is at the moment, that they are preparing for the NGC, for the policy conference and for the national conference ultimately, the fact that there is campaigning taking place already means that all of these issues become highly politicized within the context of the ANC. And therefore the fact that she is known to be on the side of, or at least not a supporter of President Ramaphosa, means that there's going to be a lot of lobbying and a lot of caucusing around this. And we've heard some reports, and it's difficult to determine whether they are indeed substantial or not, about meetings in which their predecessor, Andrew Motsekga, the Minister of Basic Education, has been involved, and others about trying to see to what extent they can have either a task team for the Women's League or be able to sort of dissolve the national executive of the Women's League. But certainly there's a lot of movement around the Women's League, because we have to remind ourselves that the Women's League has the same rights as a province when it comes to the national conference. So they can nominate the top 6 as well as for the National Executive Committee, and which gives them therefore quite a lot of influence in the election process that will happen in December.
And Rebone, as much as, we hate to admit it, but ultimately, as Thabo Mbeki, recently analyzed, it seems that all that happens during an election year of the ANC is about the election that is going to take place in the party. So with that as the context then, looking forward to what is likely to happen as a result of this in December for the ANC?
I mean, I think just to start off what Prof said, the Women's League, by the way, was due for its conference in 2020, and I think due to lockdown, regulations and COVID, so they could not, sit their conference at the time. So this issue also of the disbandment is that also they have been in office now for, in September, it will be technically 2 years over their term of office. So they are due for a new leadership, which also will determine in terms of who they support, in terms of chronization for the ANC conference. So the reality of the matter is that the stakes are high. It's about consolidating the leagues, and this also weakens the RT faction, and this makes it easy now to get her out of the way for the position of president of the Women's League, and for the CR22 faction to consolidate the Women's League, because we're seeing that we saw with the ANC Youth League, which also was due to go to its conference this month. We don't know if it will sit. So obviously the leagues, I think the leagues, if I'm not wrong, bring a delegation of 70 each. So you have 140 delegates from both the leagues. So it is going to be very vital for both factions to try and consolidate both the Youth League and the ANC Youth League, because they've got the status to vote at the conference of the ANC.
Professor Kotze, let me round off with you and then talk about perhaps just the more administrative aspect of things. For you, do you think this opens the door for more action like we are seeing now, in as far as holding public office bearers accountable?
Yes, well, certainly, and hopefully this is will be a very important court judgment in order to be able to say, well, it's not only the junior officials and government officials, but it's persons in senior positions in the ANC that are now being directly affected by these judgments. And I think one should actually emphasize the fact that perjury is not just an ordinary crime. It's something which has to do with a person's integrity, with the honesty of the person, with the credibility of the person. So in my view, it is actually a more important indication or reflection on the person than simply to say someone has been found guilty of one or other crime. So I think in that sense, yes, it is something which is a reminder and will be indicated to all ANC members that they are not beyond reproach when it comes to courts, and to be even what they have said, and not so much the fact that they have committed something necessarily, but just what they have said can constitute a serious transgression of the law.
Political analysts Rebone and Professor Dirk Kotze. Let's leave it there for tonight.